Is Ron Rivera being punished by the gods because his week 13 task certainly seems like something straight out of Greek mythology? That and more coming up right now on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to this end-of-week episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast, and you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider. Join the Locked On Commanders Insider program where you get news, inside scoops, exclusive content delivered directly to your phone via text message, text with me, one-on-one conversations, questions, conversations during games, practices, and the like. Join the Locked On Commanders Insiders now and be in the know all the time. Just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to sign up today. I'm David Harrison, your host of this program, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, I appreciate your continued support for the program. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On today's episode, we're going to talk about three keys to the Washington Commanders pulling off an upset win over the Miami Dolphins. We're going to dive into Miami's defense to see if we can find some disadvantages for Washington. But first, we're starting with the Commanders' defense, because if there is a chance that Washington pulls off this upset, this defensive unit has got to play arguably the best game that they've played all season outside of maybe New York in week 7 when they surrendered just 14 points, sacked Tyrod Taylor 4 times, and still, unfortunately, got the loss. And we're going to start our look at this weekend's matchup discussing the Miami Dolphins offense overall, but specifically why the Commanders defense needs to rally to the ball on short passes specifically, but also needs to do so with the first 2 levels of defense to allow the third level of your defense, your deep corners or your safeties, or both, to keep a lid on Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and this Miami passing attack, because this is where the opening and the thumbnail title for this episode come in. This could be a legit Sisyphean task for Ron Rivera this weekend, where he makes great effort and seems like he's making progress, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing that ends up at the end of the day all year long. So looking at this Miami Dolphins offense so far this season, the Dolphins offense has been solid or better in just about everything. They are top 5 so far this season in points per game, scoring 30 points, 8 of them, yards per play, rushing yards per play, passing yards per play, red zone offense, sacks allowed per pass, also top 5 in the NFL, top 10. They're in first downs per game. They're top 15 in third down, goal to go, time of possession. They're only below average on offense in fourth down percentage. Okay. Interception rate. So their interception rate is actually relatively high, and they're bottom 10 in field goal made percentage. So looking at those numbers and looking at those ratings or rankings, which of course, the deeper you get into the season, the more relevant the rankings really become. It looks like the Commanders' defensive advantage isn't holding the team, the Miami Dolphins, to field goal tries, right? Because they're bottom 10 in field goals made. But really, when you dive into those numbers and get some context to the Miami Dolphins field goal kicker, Jason Sanders, has a 78.6% made field goal percentage this season. That's not good, and it's number 29 in the National Football League. But he's also only tried 14 field goals, because that's how explosive and electric this offense has been. 2 of his misses have come from 50 plus. One of his 3 misses have come from 40 to 49. So really, that percentage is not a routinely missed kicks problem for Jason Sanders. It's actually a volume issue. He's only missed once from 0 to 49 yards. His other misses have all come from 50 or more because he's only tried 10 field goals this entire season. His percentage from 0 to 49 is 90%. And that's number 29 again among active kickers, because it's only one miss of all the it's one miss, but it knocks his percentage down so greatly because he doesn't get a lot of field goal opportunities, because this team is usually finding the offense. So really, what looks like an advantage may or may not be an advantage. I mean, certainly given more volume, given more opportunities, Jason Sanders could prove to have a bum leg. But at the end of the day, right now, you have to look at those numbers and understand they're skewed because of a lack of volume. Of course, I'm sure the Washington Commanders would be more than happy to let Jason Sanders or force Jason Sanders to prove that that number is a volume deficiency, not an accuracy deficiency. Because if you can force this Miami Dolphins into field goal tries instead of touchdowns, of course, you're going to be happier with that. So outside of field goal percentage, it would look like the advantage here could come in the interception rate. Tua Tagovailoa and Miami Dolphins offense, again, they're bottom 5 in the league in interception rate. So they're throwing interceptions more per pass than about 30 or about 28 other NFL teams this season. But Tua Tagovailoa himself has the third highest catchable pass percentage among all NFL quarterbacks with at least 100 attempts. So it's not that Tua's passes are not catchable. He's only got 4 turnover-worthy plays this season, according to PFF, but he's got one of the highest interception rates in the NFL. So I was a little bit confused when I read those numbers myself. So I went to the tape. I looked at every single one of his interceptions. And to be quite honest with you, there's not a lot of tip passes. There's not a lot of mistakes in that realm. Where there are mistakes is in communication with his receivers. And usually it's your run of the mill. You see it all the time watching NFL games, college football games. It's the receiver run one route, the quarterback throws another, the quarterback overthrows, underthrows, something like that. So the key is going to be those opportunities will come. The key is going to be the Commanders defense taking advantage of them. And unfortunately, as you know, Commanders fans and everydayers, we've talked about this regularly. So if you don't know on your own, you know, because I've told you, this defense, one of the worst in the league in taking advantage of those turnover-worthy plays. But if you get one of those things from Tua Tagovailoa this Sunday, you absolutely have to take advantage of it. Got to find a way to come down with that interception because getting that defense or that offense off the field is really your only good solution to trying to stop them because of how prolific they really have been. So where the Miami Dolphins advantage is against the Washington Commanders defense is pretty much everything else. So the question is Ron Rivera really going to make that big of a difference? Every defense is relatively the same in the NFL. They're pretty much all some sort of match scheme, man match, zone match. At the end of the day, it all turns into a defender matching on or latching on to an offensive player and seeing who's going to win. The key is winning off the line offensively, and it's also winning off the line defensively. Whether you're in press, whether you're in shadow, don't give your guy a free release. Don't give him an easy release, whether you're doing it physically or you're doing it with technique. So what does winning really look like? Transitioning into the route, proper play, proper positioning combinations. If I know I've got inside help, I got to make sure I don't give up my outside leverage. If I know I've got outside help, I need to make sure I don't give up my inside leverage. I don't want to get bullied off the line of scrimmage, things like that. And you definitely have to keep a top on a guy like Tyreek Hill. Looking at the formation usage, the Miami Dolphins are pretty evenly split between 11 and 21 personnel, and they rank top the best in passing offense in yards per attempt out of 11. They also have the best ranked rushing offense in yards per carry out of 11. So their 11 personnel package, very, very effective. In 21 personnel, they're not as good, but 10th ranked passing offense in 21 personnel, 6th ranked rushing offense coming out of 21 personnel. So still pretty good. But again, 11 is where they do their most damage. Some additional tendencies from the Dolphins. They're averaging 5.8 yards per carry with 36 explosive runs this season. We know the Commanders defense has had a problem limiting explosives. I will be, as I do every week, I'll be tracking the amount of them and what happens on those drives. 66% of Miami Dolphins runs come on first down, which is not a huge surprise. Most teams, most of their runs come on first down. 56% of those first down runs came out of 21 personnel. 44% of those runs go to the D gaps, which is actually outside the tight end. So even wider than wide. Only 31% of the runs go to the A or B gap. So when Ron Rivera talks about getting Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen in advantageous situations, the Miami Dolphins don't really like to run right up the middle. So maybe trying to find ways to either stunt, twist, or even line up Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne in those C gaps and things like that could be advantageous to the Washington Commanders, who do have the 6th best rushing defense as far as stopping runs through the C or D gaps this season. So that's a little bit of strength on strength there. Where the Dolphins like to run, the Washington Commanders are actually pretty good at stopping the run. The Miami Dolphins passing game, they're averaging 3.5 yards of separation, which is really good. 38 explosive passes this season, 67% completion rate when they target Tyreek Hill, and 28% of targets to Hill are at or behind the line of scrimmage. Like I said in the opening part of the segment, that is why this defense has got to be able to rally to the ball and tackle very, very quickly. Don't let the safeties, or don't put the safeties in a position or your deep corners in a position where they've got to crash down to help out on those short passes, because 25% of Tyreek Hill's targets are also 10 to 19 yards off the line of scrimmage. If your safeties and deep corners are having to crash the line of scrimmage to help in the short game, they're going to get toasted in the deep game. The Commanders defense has faced the 12th fewest passes behind or at the line of scrimmage this season, but they do have the 6th best yards per pass attempt in that situation in the NFL. And that is why this defense needs to be able to bring down those playmakers in those short pass situations so that your deep help can stay deep. Time to flip the line of scrimmage now. And we're going to talk about where Eric Bieniemy and Sam Howell have an opportunity to get a leg up on the Miami Dolphins this weekend. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot with FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bets. That's $150 if your team wins. The Miami Dolphins are currently minus 460 money line favorites to beat the Washington Commanders this weekend. Those are the best money line odds of Week 13. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day. Everydayers, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, it will take you directly to that channel at the end of this episode. So all you got to do is hang on for the ride, and we'll go over there together. Flipping sides of the ball now, the Miami Dolphins defense actually provides an opportunity potentially for the Washington Commanders to find an advantage, and this is where you need the defense to keep the game manageable. But if the Washington Commanders are going to win the game, this is where they're going to need to be even sharper to get that, take advantage of the advantage and put some points up on the board, because this isn't a bad defense by any means, but there are going to be opportunities that we're going to talk about here in just a second. But looking at the Miami Dolphins defense, they are solid or good at a lot of things. Top 5 in rushing yards per game, top 10 in yards per play, yards per pass attempt, sacks per pass attempt, and third down percentage, top 15 in first downs per game. But where they're not as good, interception rate is real low. Their red zone defense is one of the worst in the league. Their goal to go defense is not so hot. So where the Washington Commanders advantage comes in with their offense versus the Dolphins defense comes in the short passing game and red zone or better opportunities. That part of this is really, really key. And we're going to repeat it in our keys to victory as well. The Dolphins advantage comes in keeping offenses out of the red zone altogether, or locking down right outside the red zone, which some coaches would call the upper red zone or high red zone, like you're 35 or closer, but not quite inside the 20-yard line type of area. Formation usages, the Miami Dolphins defense likes to come out in a 2-4-5 formation. Most of the time, that's 64% of the time. That's the most 2-4-5 usage in the National Football League. So that's 2 down defensive linemen, 4 linebackers. Of course, 2 of those are outside linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. They use 3-4-4, 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers, 4 DBs. The second most, but only 17% of the time are they doing that. 4-man rushes 80% of the time. Rarely do the Miami Dolphins blitz. Defense coordinator Vic Fangio, not a big blitz guy. That's the 5th lowest blitzing defense in the NFL that the Commanders are going to face this weekend. Sam Howell has the most passing attempts in the National Football League against the 2-4-5 defensive look that the Miami Dolphins like to use. So this is not nearly going to be the first time he's going up against this look. And Howell is second in completions against this defensive formation, second in most catchable passes, which is incredibly important for a young quarterback, third in passing yards, 5th in touchdowns. He is tied for the most interceptions against this formation, with 3 of them coming against this look. Third most sacked quarterback against this look, 45 pressures, which is not a surprise. But from week 8, where Tyler Larson and Chris Paul were inserted into the offensive line, Howell is actually the 6th most sacked quarterback against this look, which is an improvement from 3rd most sacked overall. And while he is still the most pressured, it's by a much smaller margin from him to the second quarterback that's most pressured. So still the most pressured for what it's worth, not as often, however. So again, some improvement in the offensive line, still not great, but at least there's some improvement there. Rushing against the Miami Dolphins 2-4-5, favorite look here. Brian Robinson has the third most carries, 7th in yards, 10th in rushing touchdowns. Interestingly enough, Sam Howell is actually 7th in rushing touchdowns against this look. So this could be a Sam Howell rushing day. If you are a prize picks enthusiast like I am, that could be something that you use to make some decisions there. Both Brian Robinson and Sam Howell are 5th in broken tackles against the 2-4-5 look. B-Rob is 2nd in rushes, resulting in first downs, and he's been hit at the line 12 times. That's 2nd most, stuffed 6 times, also 2nd most. Chris Rodriguez has actually also had some solid rushes against the 2-4-5 defensive look, albeit a much smaller sample size, but still could potentially see Chris Rodriguez get some burn against this look as well, as they've had some success in the past. Now, the reason for some of this rushing success and the reason for some of this output, again, is that is our first defensive additional tendency that we're going to look at here today. Miami likes to run a light box defense. So they don't like to really stuff the box or stack the box or come with a whole lot of defenders up there, meaning that if the offensive line wins at the line of scrimmage, which we know that's kind of a hit or miss proposition there. But if the offensive line wins at the line of scrimmage, there's going to be room to run. And if Brian Robinson, Chris Rodriguez really can get downhill, or if Antonio Gibson can find some space coming through the line of scrimmage, that is where those guys can be really, really dangerous. Also, the Dolphins like to use two high shells more than 30 other NFL teams. So at least 2 of their 11 defenders are already lined up deep, dropping back deep, trying to contain the offense in front of them, which means that if you get past the original 4, remember what I said, they like to rush mostly with 4 down linemen, or four defenders rushing anyway. So if you get past those 4 guys, if you get past the line of scrimmage with those 2 deep safeties typically running on that defense, that's already 6 of the 11 defenders. And then when you think about running, left side, right side, stuff like that, you almost automatically eliminate at least 1 more defender just by play design. So if they can be successful at the line of scrimmage against this Dolphins defense, which is now missing Jalen Phillips, which is not the worst, the loss in the world, but it is still a significant loss, there's a potential that Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, Chris Rodriguez could find themselves rushing against really about 3 defenders before you get to the deep level of the defense. And you're talking 7-8 yards downfield by the time you reach that 3rd level of defense. If you can get that, somewhat consistently, certainly an avenue where the Washington Commanders can make some money and get some free chicken out of this Miami defense coming up this weekend. Miami also uses zone a ton, which makes winning off the line of scrimmage even more important, because you need to get pressure on those defenders by not just getting off the line, but getting into your route before they get to their landmarks, because zone coverages, a lot of them, they kind of rely on you drop to your landmark, see what's around you, and then you get to where you need to go. If you can make those defensive backs accelerate their mentality, accelerate their decision-making process, you're more likely to get one of them to make a mistake, overread, over pursue, and that opens up a space. And a guy like Sam Howell, if he's reading the field well and is being intelligent where he goes to the ball, you find those openings, you get the ball to those receivers, and that's where you can get a lot of explosive plays and a lot of chunk plays if you can get there. Most often than not, the Miami defense likes to leave the middle of the field open, and that's where Sam Howell's tendency to sometimes be late on passes can be problematic, because if he triggers in on an open middle of the field throw, the safety or the linebacker shallow sees it, they start pursuing it, he's late on the throw. That's where you can end up getting an interception thrown, like we have seen in other situations before this season. So really quick defense, really smart defense. So he needs to be able to click and close. Quarterback version, obviously he's not going to close on me, but click and throw, I guess, would be the quarterback version of that. So if he can do that again, those opportunities will be there. Finally, Eric Bieniemy is 6-0 against Vic Fangio as coordinators / play callers. And his offenses, EB's offenses, are averaging 28 points per game versus Vic Fangio defenses. He told me this week that he knows his offense has to stay patient. Sam Howell echoed the same sentiment. So if they can stay patient together, then that is where they're going to have some opportunities, because as we described, there are going to be some running opportunities if they can win at the first level. There are going to be some underneath opportunities against this Vic Fangio defense. Staying patient going to be incredibly important. In fact, that is our first key to victory this week, but we do have 2 more coming up on the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, and Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Game Time gives you the lowest price guarantee event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, and you can see the view from your seat before you make your purchase, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account with Game Time, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Commanders host the Miami Dolphins this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Catch every snap of the Commanders' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SiriusXM app. Just search Commanders, and while you're there, you might hear a familiar voice during the game. We've gone over some tendencies going up against the Miami Dolphins, some areas we think the Washington Commanders might be able to find some room to do some damage against them. So what are the keys that we can develop from all these tendencies? Well, key number one, we already kind of talked about, stay patient on offense. Look, you're going to have to take some shots. At the end of the day, you can't just check down. You can't just screen. You can't just slant all day long. You do have to keep the defense honest. You do have to take some shots here and there. But the key is taking smart shots, right? And that really comes down to Eric Bieniemy calling plays that have 2 or 3 levels of attack, right? Don't just call plays that have, don't call 4 verts and all that stuff and really give Sam no other option but to try to find a deep route, because he's a competitor. He's a young quarterback, and he's going to try to fit the ball into one of those deep routes. Ideally, you call 4 vertical routes and you tell your quarterback, hey, bro, if none of them are there, get out of the pocket, run the ball, and get as many yards as you can with your legs. But we've seen Sam Howell time and time again. If he's got 4 vertical routes, he's going to want to take one of those shots, EB. So give him some options. Give him some short routes. Give him some intermediate routes, and tell him, if it's not there, take the check down. Go below the top of the defense, because the Miami Dolphins will keep the top on the defense as much as they can, and they love guys like Jalen Ramsey's got 3 interceptions. He's only played 4 games this season since he came back. He's already got 3 interceptions. He's 1 away from matching his entire total last season. And again, he's only played 4 games so far. So you do have to take some shots, but again, take smart shots, dial them up only when they're necessary. And Sam just needs to do what he did most of preseason, a lot of the season so far. Put those deep shots to where only your receiver can get them. If they can't get them, nobody should get them. Only want to see shots really taken on 2nd and 4, 1st and 5. You know what I mean? Look, if you're 3rd and 4, 2nd and 6, 1st and 10, like don't use your deep shot tries in those plays. Use them when you have the opportunity. If you go deep on 2nd and 4 and it's incomplete, you come back on 3rd and 4, you can live with that. 1st and 5, you take a deep shot, comes up 2nd and 5, you can live with that. But don't do that crap on 1st and 10, 2nd and 8, stuff like that. 2nd and 8, you need to find as many yards as you can to make it 3rd and manageable. If you get a first down, great. But that's kind of my look on how to stay patient against the Miami Dolphins defense. Key number 2, keep the lid on their offense. You got to flip sides of this thing. The Miami Dolphins are going to try to do it. The Washington Commanders have to be able to do it. They have very similar defenses, which to me should fall into the advantage column, really for both sides, to be honest with you. But the Washington Commanders should feel a little bit more comfortable going up against this defense, because it is very similar. I talked to one of the players in the locker room off the record, but not completely. The information is fine, but not who I talked to. And yeah, a lot of similarities between these two defenses certainly should provide a little bit of comfortability for what the offense is trying to do. The key, of course, is going to be holding up that pass rush. So keeping the lid on the Miami Dolphins offense. Key number 2, one safety on every play has to be assigned to stay deep on top of Tyreek Hill, even if there's multiple deep routes. Like I've said this before in other games, you guys, every dares, you've heard me say this before, and unfortunately, we don't really oftentimes see it. But you talk about simplifying the strategy. One way to simplify a strategy against the Miami Dolphins is to say, hey, your assignment is Tyreek Hill deep, and then everything else. You know what I mean? Like just start off deep. If Tyreek cuts it off, short, fine. Start looking, make sure he's not running a double move. Start looking around, see who's coming in. But your first and only responsibility is going to be Tyreek Hill. I covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl that year with Tom Brady. The first time they played the Kansas City Chiefs, Todd Bowles, their defense coordinator at the time, tried to come out and play some man. He tried to play some single high safeties and do all this other stuff. And Tyreek Hill and the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely torched them for about the first quarter and a half of the game. So much and so that actually the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ended up adjusting to playing top coverage over Tyreek Hill and literally dedicated a safety to say, you stay on top of Tyreek Hill and don't do anything else. And they were able to mitigate that risk, and they were able to actually control the better part of 2.5 quarters. But the Chiefs did so much damage in that first quarter and a half that it didn't matter. They still lost the game. But when they came back in the Super Bowl, You saw them employ a lot of those things again against the Chiefs offense, and the result, the Kansas City Chiefs only scored 9 points. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the Super Bowl. That is really the only way I see that you can stop a Tyreek Hill-led offense, is put a dude whose job is literally, you're the Tyreek Hill bodyguard. Your job is to stay on top of him 24/7 in this game. Key number 3, roll the dice. And I know that sounds a little bit different because of what I've been saying about stay patient against this Miami Dolphins defense, but early fourth down plays, typically I call them early signs of desperation, or that you know that you're not stacking up against this team. Well, let's be a little bit honest here, guys. This team does not, the way that these two teams have been playing, this Washington Commanders team does not stack up to this Miami Dolphins team. So you need to take these opportunities. If you come up at 4th and 5 on the Miami Dolphins 40, you need to go for it. If you come up at 4th and 2 on the 48, you need to go for it. Anything past the 50 with, I would say, 8 or fewer yards to gain, you need to go with that. In fact, I would kind of go from the 50, 8 yards up to the 40. So, you know, if you're 4th and 8 at the 49, I think you're probably punting. But if you're 4th and 7 at the 49, you're going for it. 4th and 6 at the 47, you're going for it. So on and so forth. You need to take advantage of every opportunity you have to be in their end, because like we discussed, the Miami Dolphins do not have a great red zone and goal to go defense, but they're really good at keeping you out of the red zone and goal to go situations. Anyway, underdogs can be dangerous, but only if they're willing to bite. The Washington Commanders have to come out here aggressive. Don't be reckless. I'm not saying, you know, even 4th and 1 on your own 26 in the first quarter. I'm not saying go for that, but you get on the plus side of the field and you have somewhat of a 4th and manageable situation. This defense likes to keep that top coverage. They like to play loose in the middle of the field. They like to give you lanes, take advantage of those opportunities, make some things happen. I think a good amount of receptions by Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson for what he can do. I think Chris Rodriguez in short areas or short yardage areas. I think Curtis Samuel could have another good game. Obviously, you want to get Terry McLaurin open and loose. Would love to see Jahan Dotson going as well. But the bottom line is you have to be a little bit more aggressive in this game just because of what your matchup is. You don't want to give them the ball back if you don't absolutely have to. Going into our game status report for the Washington Commanders, cornerback Emmanuel Forbes, defensive end James Smith-Williams are both out for this game. Tyler Larson is questionable for this game, but judging from Ron Rivera's conversations earlier in the season, unless there has been a setback that I'm not aware of, I expect Tyler Larson to play. If he doesn't play, you expect Nick Gates to step in as a center once again. For the Miami Dolphins, questionable are offensive tackles Teron Armstead and Kendall Lamb, guards Lester Cotton, Robert Jones, and free safety Javon Holland. I see some comments here with the folks that are joining me live, talking about Eric Bieniemy and coaching searches and everything next year. Look, we've had some conversations about the coaching staff earlier this week. We will obviously continue to have conversations about the coach staff as we go along as well. But for this episode, we're going to stick to the game at hand, and hopefully we can come back Sunday night live from FedEx Field talking about a Washington Commanders victory. That is the next time I will be speaking to all of you, again, live from FedEx on Sunday evening, early Sunday evening. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, just leave them in the YouTube comment section. Find me on Twitter or become a Locked On Commanders insider and text me directly. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get in on that fun. Locked On Commanders Insiders. Tomorrow, our command huddle, our next command huddle, our insider-only mailbag episode will be dropping. I will be sending that to you as soon as it is ready. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thank you for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.